Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever it may be in your neck of the woods. I am so honored and delighted to have such a phenomenal group of ladies, and I do mean ladies, that's going to be gracing us today. I want to welcome each of you to the platform. You're listening to Conversations in the Nick of Time. I am your host, Nikki Roach. On this platform, we focus on leadership excellence and leadership accidents, knowing that we need both of them to be successful in our journey. And I always say you have everything you need to be successful. It's just a matter of tapping into it and you defining what success is for you, not according to the world. Well, want to also give a thank you for helping us set up this whole platform. Sparkman Pathway to Careers, KSTL Jubilee 690, and Covenant Exchange. I could not be more ready for this conversation. I want to also remind you this is the day that we yield the floor to our guest host. And our guest host is Fay Fleming. You are very familiar with Fay by this time, but just in case you don't know, she is the founder, the brains and the body and the beauty behind Business Performance Company, a national market researcher, Fortune consultant, strategist, author, speaker, mom, and just a dear friend and a lady of grace. So I want to plug that in too for all that we talk about today. Faye, how are you?
I am blessed. I'm so excited about this particular show. And I just wish that I had seen this show when I was 18.
That would be me as well. And I'm going to yield the floor right to you to get us started with our segment.
Okay. So
And
thank
then,
you.
yes.
There are many women who still believe the myth of women don't support each other.
Mhm.
Nikki Roach is a living testimony to someone who is not only willing to share her light, but willing to instruct and to mentor as she shares her light. So we're going to do our feature at the end of the month, as we have for the last 3 months, called Real Business, Real Solutions. Tonight, we will be focusing on leadership. And we will look at three different stages: how you start as a leader, as well as the middle ground, promotions, moving to the executive phase. And then once you get there, how do you stay there?
Yes.
Which brings me to my guest tonight, Miss Deborah Patterson. So, for many people who live in the St. Louis area, this is just a repeat. For those of you who have never had a Deborah Patterson experience,
Ah.
buckle up. A little bit about Deborah Patterson. She received her Bachelor of Science degree as well as her Master's of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Missouri St. Louis. She also participated in Harvard's Kennedy School for Senior Executives in State and Local Government. She retired 5 years ago as the Vice President of Global Contribution and Employee Engagement at Monsanto, which is now known as Bayer. Prior to joining Monsanto, she was the Chief Executive Officer of the American Red Cross of Eastern Missouri. She is well known for having a very articulate, clear voice in our community. She's also very active in the community, serving on local organizational boards, which include Barnes Jewish Hospital, St. Louis County Library Board, Pulitzer Arts Foundation, and Delta Dental of Missouri. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Faye. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
We're so excited about what is about to erupt on this show. So
Very excited.
I want to start off by giving our listeners and viewers some context. Why even talk about leadership and its impact on women? So here's some fresh research. A 2020 analysis showed from 1,100 organizations across the world that while women make up 47% of the support staff, they only make up 23% of the executive staff. And then if you pull that back from a global view to the United States, despite a record number of 500 Fortune 500 women CEOs in 2020, there are still nearly 13 companies run by a man for every company run by a woman. In the United States, again, 47% of the labor force is female, but only 40% are even at the first line manager role. 2019, white women held almost a third of all management positions. Women of color, not so much. Latinas, 4.3%, Black women, 4%, Asian women, 2.5%. So that's our background on for what reasons we're talking about this during the show. Leadership in all phases. So we're going to start out with something we call My Take, which gives each of our speakers an opportunity to kind of summarize their viewpoint on the portion of leadership. I'm talking about starting the leadership journey, and then I will hand it off to Deborah Patterson, who will then hand it back off to Nikki to talk. Oh, I'm sorry. It'll start with me. I'll hand to Nikki. Nikki will give us to Deborah Patterson, who will close up. All right, so when you think about the majority of information and training, even coaching that's available, it really starts with once you get the title of being a leader. And Black women in particular often lack the kind of what I call practice at the big table, the coaching, the mentoring, advocacy, because we don't naturally attract these kinds of people in organizations that we work in. But in spite of that, women are notorious for being informal leaders, for being influential in organizations around new practices and decision making. Unfortunately, sometimes not only do we not get what we need, sometimes we get bad advice. So here's our actual story. Ernst & Young is ranked 29th among global accounting firms. In 2018, they conducted a day-and-a-half seminar specifically to equip their executive women in leadership. Some of the advice that they included in this day-and-a-half seminar: when women speak, you must not speak in a shrill tone. Advice number 2, clothing must flatter, but short skirts are a no-no. And the last point, if you want men to focus on what you're saying, then you must be very careful not to show skin. You listen to this and you think, wow, it's like coaching women to be the best someone else that they've never been, right? And to think a company this huge is giving this kind of advice to women in executive and senior leadership. From my point of view, my take is you can maximize your success by starting before you start a leadership position. And the best way to do that is to learn how to lead yourself so that you are now prepared to lead others.
All good.
So Nikki, so now that we've started, what then is your take on now you are a leader and you're in the middle part of your career?
And so I know my take on being in the middle of leadership. I've experienced a fast trajectory, and oftentimes those of us who, whether it's fast, slow, or medium speed, we've heard of the term glass ceiling. And glass ceiling is a metaphor used to represent this invisible barrier that prevents women, given within the different various demographics, the barrier of rising beyond that point. And this was first coined by, they say, a group of feminists um, to signify what women and high achieving women were experiencing. Well, now, while many of us may be familiar with that one, I want to introduce some to what's now called the glass cliff. And the glass cliff is a spin-off and a continuation of what it is. And many of us who may be in leadership at this point may have experienced some level of this. And the glass cliff is a research-based phenomenon wherein a woman or a person of color is promoted to a senior leadership position during a difficult time of the company. And the risk of failure are very, very high. So you're offered an opportunity, but the risk of you being successful deems very stressful And a lot is attached to this. And a lot of times we will hear, well, we gave you a chance, but you gave us a chance in a situation and under circumstances that were already high risk. And so, again, while we have the glass ceiling, which causes us to experience barriers once we reach a certain level, there is now what's called the glass cliff, in which we slide off of. We're at the top, but we slide off of this glass cliff, or the cliff, because of the glass, it gets chipped. So now we have risk, we have damage, and we also fall off that cliff. And so there's a lot of ways that we can explore as we move forward in regards to how do we begin to prevent that, or we also set up some boundaries, but also some expectation. And as I was saying before we got on the air, how do we create community? How do we create advocates, um, um, mentors, sponsors? All of that falls into this place to keep us, one, from moving beyond the glass ceiling, which for women of color is called the concrete ceiling. And then we have the glass cliff.
And you know what,
Now,
Nikki? The thing about that is that it's ironic that the company cannot lose, right? Because even if the company promotes you or promotes Deborah and you fail, the company is still perceived as being progressive and inclusive.
exactly. Now I want to turn it over to Lady Patterson. How are you?
I am really well, Nisi. Now, here's my thinking. So you got a cliff, and the question is, how do you mitigate risk?
Mhm.
How do you mitigate risk? And when I think about mitigating risk and retaining that senior position, that you've got to do a lot of groundwork before you take that job. A lot of groundwork. So you need intelligence. You need to know yourself first and foremost. You need to know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, what you can tolerate, what kind of management style works best for you to be successful. You really need to understand in that position, how deep is your learning curve? You got a short learning curve, you got a deep learning curve, and because that matters. How long will it take you to get to a place where you can be productive? What happened? What brought on the crisis? Was it the person in the job, or was it the boss? I'm just saying, the person in the job could have had all kinds of good ideas, but they were quashed by their boss. So you really need to dig into what happened there. Were there adequate resources, both human and financial? What about the team?
Mhm.
Is it a team that has the skills that are needed to be successful? Who has whose back? Is there somebody on the team that said, oh, I should have had that job? So now you know you got a problem that you got to deal with, right? And then you have to understand your boss's leadership style and whether that's going to work for you. Like for me, nobody gets to raise their voice at me. So if you're a voice raiser, a hollerer, I can't work for you. So I put some, stakes in the ground around what I'm going to tolerate. You need to understand how long you have to turn things around. Will you be able to bring on your team, or will you be handicapped? And then the other thing I would say, who has your back? You need to know who has your back. Who are your allies? So if you hit a snag, who you gonna call, right? And I also think that women in particular have to be bold, have to be brave. You have to ask for what you want.
Mm.
You don't wait for somebody to say, well, we're going to give you this. You say, this is what I believe I need to be successful, including coaching and mentoring. Because most successful executives have coaches, they have mentors. So we should be bold. We should ask for what we want while we're in a position of power to get it. Not after you're on the job, but when you're in negotiation.
Interesting.
And you know what, Deborah, that's all circles back to your first statement about you need some intellect, you need some intelligence.
Mhm.
We do research all the time, and what we find is that especially white males, they walk in the door saying, oh no, I gotta have an executive coach. Oh no, I must have a blah, 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 blah. But if you come in as a first time manager or leader, or maybe you even have now been promoted to a senior level, if you don't get that table stakes, everybody is asking for this and getting it. You can't negotiate your best start, and your ending will look a lot like the way that you started.
If I could jump in, there's some questions that I would love to ask if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. One, you mentioned determine your learning curve. If you can unpack that just a little bit for us, I know what that means, but a lot of times we know that after we are knee deep into the job.
So part of intelligence is understanding not just the tasks to be done, but also the political landscape. You need to understand how long is it going to take you to produce what is expected of you. So I'll give you an example. I was recruited to be an institutional advancement officer for St. Louis University. Okay. I don't know nothing about institutional advancement. So I thought my learning curve will be steep. Their expectation for results would be short. So I said, oh no, this is not for me. Okay. I'm not setting myself up for failure. So I'm not taking this job. I suggested to them that they get someone with more experience, that had the institutional advancement experience, because what they didn't understand, in my opinion, that it wasn't just FaceTime with donors. It was about strategy development. It was about figuring out the systems to support an advancement program. I didn't know any of that. So my learning curve would be so much steeper than the person that had done that job before. And I valued my reputation, as a successful, get stuff done woman, that I wasn't about to take on something where they're sullying my reputation when it was really, they shouldn't have hired me in the first place. So that's what.
And you know what? I think that what's really important there that people can walk away with is the power to say no.
Yeah.
To say, no, this is not good for me, or this is not a good fit for me, or no, this is not a good time for me. I think people feel a lot of pressure, especially women, right? We heard the stats to say, okay, there's the common wisdom is that if they offer you a promotion and you don't take it, the punitive backlash it'll be a long time before they offer you something else. But what's more important is picking something that you can be successful at. And so I hope people hear that and give themselves permission to say, no, I know me better than anyone else. I know what I need. I know what would be good for me at this point in time in my career, and to do what's best for you.
Absolutely. Self first.
Yeah. And I love how both of you have brought out the fact, because we talk about personal brand so much, and we think it's just being busy and moving and bouncing and on the next wave of what's trending. But I love how both of you have called us out to recognize that every offer is not a yes. And that's, for those in my, Gen X on down, we're so quick, like we want stuff so fast. But it takes years to establish that work. And you don't, I hear you. You're not trying to set yourself up for all that to be dismantled by something that, as you said, know yourself, have a sense of intelligence, determine that learning curve. Like I'm hearing in my ear, be honest first with yourself, then with the other people. It's not the last and only offer that you will ever get.
It will be
As a
if you
matter of-
take that job and you fail. It might be a long time before you get another one.
That's so true. So true. So true. Then there is you mentioned acts about expectations.
Yes, absolutely. You need to engage with your boss, whoever's going to be your boss, about expectations, whether that is a board of directors, the executive committee, the chairman of the board, or if it's a senior vice president. You need to get clarity around expectations. You need to get clarity around timing. What are you expecting me to do by when? A turnaround in 90 days, someone says turnaround in 90 days, and you can look and say, oh my God, I don't know. And then you can say, how do you expect me to turn this around in 90 days when the last person that was in this job couldn't turn it around in 3 years? That's what I would say.
You know what? And as a follow-up to that, I think that it's critical for you to know something about the culture of the organization and have an inkling about what the unwritten rules and the unspoken relationships are. Because before you can do this step that Deborah just gave us, which is critical, you have to know to whom you direct which questions to.
Yeah.
Because the questions you would ask a board member, very different than the questions you would ask your immediate supervisor or even your peer groups of colleagues, right? So not only do you need to know what to ask, you need to know how to ask and to whom you put these questions to actually get a sense of, is this something that you can and are willing to do? And as Deborah has said, sometimes you walk away and it's the best thing for yourself as well as for the organization.
Okay, Faye, I'm going to turn it over to you in just a moment. It is you, but I just wanted to, there were so many great points. And thanks for also both of you commenting. Who has your back, you ask? Who will you call? Who can you call? How important is that?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, and building relationships and building capital with people within your company or organization so that they know you, they trust you, they respect you, and because of that, you get some grace. You get some grace. So if you take a job and no one knows anything about you, you had your head down, you've been working real hard, and no one knows you, you have no one. You have no one to call. So you can't just say, if I keep my head down, I do a good job, that's sufficient. It is not sufficient. You have got to have relationships, because successful people have relationships that support them when they're in good times and when they run into a little snag. So relationship building is critical.
That word that you're using, Deborah, capital, is critical from my point of view because people understand that if you don't already have cash in bank, it doesn't matter where your ATM card is because no matter what machine you stick it into, there's no cash coming out. It's like that whole thing about the best time to dig a well is before you need the water.
Absolutely.
So in the formative stages, before you ever get the title, first learn how to lead yourself. One of the key ingredients is you got to build your bench. You got to have people inside and outside of the organization for whom you've already made an investment, that there's always some cash in bank so that when you need help, advice, trouble, or somebody to throw in an IOU in on your behalf, that debit card will actually work.
Yeah. Last thing before I let go of the question, you mentioned be bold. And as women of color in leadership, as people of color in leadership, as women who land in leadership, bold can mean a number of things. And oftentimes, especially as women, we are taught that, we need to be a little more aggressive. But yet, if we're too aggressive, it comes off wrong or it's off putting. We need to speak up. If you don't speak up and you're too soft spoken, you're not engaged. If you speak up too much, you're too aggressive, you're too involved. But you said we need to be bold. Explain what this being bold means, what it is, and what it isn't.
Being bold, in my opinion, is finding your voice, and your voice might be different than mine. And I often say to people, you may not be able to say what I say. Be yourself, find your voice, find a way of getting your point across. So I'll give you an example. I joined Monsanto and I said, oh my God, I'm going to be with all these scientists, all these smart people. They're so smart. They're just so incredible. So I'm sitting in the room and there's a meeting and this guy goes, I think such and such and such. And this one, and I'm thinking, I thought that too. I think this, I thought that too. So the next time it came up, I said, well, here's what I think. And they said, oh, yeah. I said, yes, that's what I think. So it gave me, I had the confidence to find my voice. At first, I was a little scared because everybody was a scientist, but then I thought, hey, they're not that smart. They're no smarter than me. So yeah, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be brave. And every once in a while, I may be wrong.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I may be wrong. But if no one ever hears your voice, they have no idea what you're thinking. If you never put anything out there, a lot of cultures, company cultures, say, oh, she don't know nothing. She never contributes. So I think you have to take a risk and let your voice be heard and roll with whatever comes as a result of that. I have always made my voice heard.
I know.
One of the biggest detriments to not using your own voice is that through your silence, you confirm and validate their thinking, right? So if they think, years ago, we did research with HR managers and with senior teams. And what we got back is that if Black men are not smiling, they're angry. But if Black men are smiling too much, they're deemed as, well, he's a jokester. He's here for entertainment. They wouldn't take him seriously. Same thing with Black women. If Black women spoke too often, or if people started to overtalk them and they persisted, that took you to the double B designation. On the other hand, if they sat with their head down and took notes, they look like an admin person. people would treat them like an admin person.
Yes. I think it would be board meeting day. People said, oh, because we were casual. Oh, you all dressed up. I said, it's board meeting day. This is power. I'm getting everything approved today. Nobody messing around. This is
And I think people respond to that energy, right?
yeah. And I always felt like I know more about the information that I put in front of you. I know more about this than anybody in the room. So yes, I'm going to win.
Because you set out to win. Many people are playing not to lose. And there's a big difference between playing not to lose and playing to win. And while I've never sat in a boardroom, well, yes, I have sat in a boardroom.
You sat in boardrooms with me.
That's right. What I was going to say is that my epiphany came when I was consulting with NASA, right? Because of proverbial, rocket scientists. And when I got into the room with rocket scientists, I still had a valid contribution to give them about their organization and their business, having never spent a day as an employee at NASA. One of my favorite stories is once there was a presenter who came up with a new concept, and he pulled together the best and the brightest from all across the United States. And I was invited to come, and I thought, oh, this is going to be very interesting. I'm going to be on the cusp of some new management theory. I walk into the room, there's 35 people, and I am greeted by people who say, oh, I did see you at the alumni meeting. And I'm going, what alumni meeting? Harvard. Surely you're from Harvard. So within the first 7 minutes, they vetted me and shut me down, right? This is pointing back to what you said, Deborah, about use your voice, and everyone has a different style. So my style is to strategically use my voice. So once everybody discounted me in the first 7 minutes, we're in this crowd of 35 people, the presenter starts giving this theory, this new concept, and he then asked for feedback. And the Harvard people, the Stanford people, they're giving some feedback. And I just waited. In the middle of it, I stood up and said, well, you know what? It sounds like this theory will work really well if you did A plus 1 plus 2 and then crossed it with X. And the guy got really excited. He said, oh, I never thought about it that way. And for the next 9 minutes, this presenter had a one-on-one conversation with me, and I kept innovating and applying his new concept in different fields of study. And at the end, minute number 10, I sat down. So for me, that was my epiphany of no matter how we are vetted, how we're looked at, how we are characterized before we ever open our mouth, just by walking in, back to what Deborah did, you got to know your value, you got to be steeped in it, you got to understand it. And for me, strategically know when to launch it.
Yeah, I know there is an occasion I remember a few years back with an organization I was serving and helping out with. And it was all of leadership that were called into an emergency meeting. And we were dealing with an issue that needed immediate attention. But the question was, do we just put out a little blurb about it to acknowledge that we know what's going on and we're going to address it, or what other ways can we approach it? So the chief communication officer opted to say that I've already discussed the matter with my team. We've come up with this strategy, and the strategy was to create a blurb and put this blurb in a publication and also on, social media and all that to acknowledge it. And I'm the only person of color. I'm the youngest, probably the most green out of all the leaders. And we're sitting in this mahogany laced conference room. And out of nowhere, I just lift up my head and I said, I'm going to push back on this recommendation. And everyone was kind of like, what? Because I didn't really speak often. And so I get how using it strategically, to echo you, Fay, I get that. But then, Deborah, I also echo you to where that confidence came, but I knew what I was talking about. And I have realized when I don't prepare and do the homework, and sometimes that means I have to double down and do some stuff I'm really not trying to read about, but you better know something. And this time I knew enough, but I also, it meant something to me, going back to knowing your values. So for me, because of my value and my knowledge, the confidence was there. And I realized it's not, I can't wait on the confidence. I have to build the confidence. And it took me a while. I'm still learning that in my career. But in that instance, I pushed back. And do you know, they end up taking my recommendation, which was not popular, but everyone from the president all the way down to some of the others who I did not engage with as often either called me, sent an email, or popped by my office and said, you were right. I was thinking it, but I didn't think, I thought maybe the other, basically the easy way would be the best way. And that grew me up so fast in that moment when I realized no one wanted to go against what the leader was saying, but here we go. So now I have learned, listen, but speak up when it aligns with
You were brave.
value.
You
Yeah.
were brave.
Yeah.
You were brave. And your braveness and boldness came from it came from knowledge. It came from knowing knowing the field of study. So you could be brave, you could be bold. Absolutely.
And we all need to know and do our own homework to come up with what do we need in order to be bold? What do we need in order to seamlessly be courageous? What do we need to not only have a voice, but to use it? And when you do use it, you leverage up the conversation or you bring some relevant contribution to the conversation. So this has been wonderful. We've had a lot of great stories. I don't want us to end without having some solutions, some ways to get started. So I'm going to start off with in launching your career. The first thing you want to do is to start with a personal brand assessment, which is what Deborah said about you have to know yourself. And then once you assess yourself and your potential to be a leader, you need to do your own work to clear that out and figure it out for yourself. You know, develop a leadership blueprint, understand your philosophy, your values, your beliefs, and the goals that you would have as a leader, so that that way you end up being steeped in what I call your authentic leadership style. And back to what Nikki said, is work. You should expect to do the work. But after you do the work, you have the necessary foundation, much like concrete foundation to build a house on, to actually start building a great format to be an excellent leader. So that's how you start. I pass it to you, Nikki.
Okay. So a solution, and I talked about the glass ceiling and the glass cliff. Um, I'm gonna borrow from Deborah and say that you need to know who has your back. You need to have someone to call. You also need mentor and sponsor. There is a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. I always recommend having at least three at all times, which is your own personal cabinet, someone same sex, same gender. I mean, same gender, same race, someone same sex, different race, opposite sex. So a man. So for us, it would be another sister. It would be someone who is of another race, but still a female, and then a male. And what I have found, and it has not failed me for many years now, you can present the same exact issue, concern, or victory to each of them, those three, and they will each give you a different perspective. And I like that because it causes you not to lean into one person kind of giving you and dictating to you how they did it, and you take that and run with it. As you were saying earlier, know your own voice, Deborah. this allows you to establish your own voice because you have these three perspectives. And how do I fit into this? Even though it's all wisdom, how do I insert myself into this? And it has really worked. And the higher you go, I've heard the higher you go, sometimes the lonelier it gets. And I think there is some truth, but yet it's not true. Because as you begin to develop these relationships, I think you have to be more intentional about who it is that you allow to pour into you, but also making sure you don't give out and never replenish. I know we talk about this a lot of times. There's a give and a get. And as you're in this place of, we're talking about the glass ceiling, the glass cliff, you're not going to know it all. I had to learn that you're not going to know it all. Ask questions. Actually, I'm learning great leadership is about asking the questions, because a lot of times we think we're running in, rushing in, we're solving it. And right now we've got so many demands and pressures coming at us in leadership, and all of these different expectations from different stakeholders, because now people are so involved, whether they're a part of the organization or not. You've got to know who you are. You've got to know who your voice, all of that. But that community, it goes back to that community, or back to that. I know some people say tribe or my sisterhood, sisterhood, all of those acronyms. You need to tap into that, men and women.
That's great. And the only thing I would add to that is that it's always helpful to have an internal set of people on your bench as well as external. And sometimes you don't want to overlook vendors, because vendors are moving around in your industry, in your competitive set, and they have a different perspective that you can also use. Deborah, what do you think? Some solutions, some things to try. Unmute.
To Nisi's point about listening, I think you have to, as a leader, you need to listen before you craft solutions. And I agree, you need to ask questions. I always ask why. Why is it that way? Why can't it be this way? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? How could you do that differently? So you're forcing your team to think. You're forcing your team to think. And because when you get in front of the senior leadership, they're going to ask you why. Why is it this way? Why is it that way? Did you think about this? So, listening and asking questions to inform and prepare to make your case for whatever it is you want to have happen is critical. Data, and more data to substantiate what it is that you are proposing. So people say, oh, they can see into the future. That CEO, he knows everything about the future. No, he's reading trends. He's reading trends. He's understanding what's going on in that market. He's a futurist because he's taking this data, processing this data, and developing strategies. And that's what you need to do at a very senior level. Well, I think that's what you need to do when you get to be a manager.
Right, because it builds your brand as someone who consistently will have strategies and thoughts and suggestions that are based in something concrete. It's not just because I thought it up last night. It is because I have a reputation for being credible and trustworthy, and I don't bring it unless I have documentation, some factual, something other than my gut to the table.
And the other thing, and I only bring things forward if I know I'm going to win. So I do all my legwork beforehand, and I'm talking to the people that are making the decisions, and I'm running this by them and saying, so what do you think about this? And then give me a little input, make a few changes. What did you think about this? But if five out of seven of them say, oh, well, I don't know, I'm not ready. Know when you're not ready. It's not ready. It is not ready. You haven't convinced. This is not ready. You got more work to do.
And here's a key element to that is that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that you have to build substantive relationships ahead of time. Because in my career, and I've witnessed this among other people, if you don't truly have a relationship with someone, sometimes people steer you wrong on purpose. So you have to already have that relationship based and steeped into something that's more than a surface relationship to know that when they ask questions, those are concrete questions, and you can take that to the bank and say, not just now. This needs to be tweaked. Or I thought this was ready, but I see now that this is creating more questions than people focusing on the answers. So I think it all goes back to what we're saying here tonight. Regardless of what stage that you're in, these are the kinds of things that need to be done. And Nikki, to your point, the higher up you go, people say it's lonely. I think it's different. I think the real thing is that the higher you go up, the more input you have to have from your peer set, right? I thought when I made it to the executive team of $1 billion organization, it would be a representation of the fact that I really knew what I knew. The higher you go up, the more the nuances are, the more political it is, and the more everybody else is going to be asked to put skin in the game for the things that you do, and you're going to have to reciprocate. So that's a whole nother minefield. And if you come in saying, oh no, I didn't run it about accounting, I'm in marketing. Accounting has nothing to do with this. That's not the point. That's not the point. And it goes back to culture and cues and unwritten rules and unspoken relationships.
Well,
This has
Faye,
been a
I
great.
believe you have to manage in all directions. You have to manage horizontally,
Yes.
and you have to manage up, and you have to manage down. You can't just say, I'm going to manage down, because the people that you need to help you be successful on that horizontal line can kill you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In more than one way.
Yeah.
And they don't need much incentive to, as a tribe, rally the wagons around disrupting your agenda. This has been great. Nikki, thanks for letting us focus on real business and real solutions.
Yeah.
I hand it back off to you.
So I'm gonna just ask just a couple more questions of both of you, being that we have had such an amazing conversation. I'm downloading and processing much of what has been said. What would you, and this is a signature question that many will ask, what would you have told your 30-year-old self with what you know today?
I would have said, thoroughly understand the culture, the environment, how you get a reward, how you get a hit, the task, the mechanics, your expertise. All of that is a clear way for you to know whether or not you're ready. But I don't care how expert you are, if you don't manage that other periphery of relationships in politics, in company culture, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Smart people with great ideas are being fired every day, are being sabotaged every day, are being held back every day from being successful because they did not understand team ball and they didn't play.
Interesting. Thank you.
So I would tell my 30-year-old self to shut up sometimes, because I would try to anticipate the question.
Okay.
So that meant I wasn't listening. and which I should be listening as opposed to saying, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. So learning to listen, digest, and then respond. The mayor, the mayor of the city, I work for the mayor, and so he's talking, and then I'm trying to talk. He said, "So you already know what I'm going to say." I was just like, he said, "Listen," and that's what it's taken me a while to learn to listen. It's also taken a while for me to manage my emotions. I'm very emotional. You can read me, or you could read me. So, learning not to let people read you all, every emotion that you have is, I think, important, like playing poker. I don't think they need to understand all your moods based on your face. And because then they know how to yank your chain. So I would tell my 30-year-old self to be cool, listen more, and be thoughtful in your response. Slow down and be thoughtful and strategic in your response.
Interesting. I know I'm thinking like, okay, do I have anything? But even though I'm just 29, no, just kidding. I would tell my 30-year-old self, you know a little something, but not enough to not prepare. Take your time to prepare your thoughts. Even though sometimes, like for me, I've been big on like um, key points. I don't need to write out everything. That may be true, but that does not take away from preparation. And so while you get to a point to where you kind of know a few things, you know the industry because you put in a few years, you've had a couple promotions, and okay, I got this. I can just show up. No, there is nothing like preparation. And back to that confidence. Some people say, oh, I waver in my confidence. There's a sense to where I'm nervous, and it's a good nervous. To me, it means I care. And every time I feel that bubbling up in my stomach, I say, this is great. Thank you, God. I still care about this situation. I still care about what I'm doing. Yeah. However, you better be prepared and know your stuff. Even when you think you're over preparing or you might still think you know a little something, I learned still go back and read. And I would tell my 30-year-old self, and I tell myself right now that those same things. So if you had each of you one word to share to a leader who is based off of your word and your space that you presented when we um, did our thoughts, what one word would you give them to keep them encouraged and pressing forward?
Authenticity.
Authenticity.
No one can outdo you being the best you.
Okay.
Courage.
Courage. Have courage. I am so excited about this conversation, and I'm hoping that you are both up to a second part one day soon. This has just been phenomenal. I know if you could each give just information about where people can find you or learn more about you, wherever that space may be, and then we'll close out.
So you can find me on our website at www.bizperformanceco.com. You can find me personally on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at Fay Speaks First.
Wonderful.
And you can find me on LinkedIn.
Under Deborah Patterson.
Yes, under Deborah Patterson.
Wonderful. I want to thank Fay Fleming and Deborah Patterson for joining us here on another Conversations in the Nick of Time. Now, this one truly was in the nick of time because I know you are listening, whether you're a leader by title or a leader by presence and mindset. We all have a role to contribute, but we've given you some tools and some insight in this wisdom I am basking in. And I know I don't even have to ask this time. I know something has been said to assist you along the way. We've given you something for your head. We've given you something to fill with your heart. Now you have something for your hands to do. So we charge you to go out and do it and be the best you can be in it. Remember, you have everything you already need to be successful. It's a matter of tapping into it, living out success as you define it, not according to the world. Until next time, we want you to go be good, be great, and we'll see you next time. Thank you to Sparkman Pathway to Careers, KSTL, Jubilee 690, and Covenant Exchange for your continued support.